Hello everyone.
Hi.
So this video is a review of Adventureland as we promised back in one of our previous videos when we were leaving. The reason why it took so long to do this video is because I wanted to no longer be mad at them and be able to be as fair and unbiased as I possibly could.
Oh, the day I break these chains, I'm bound for the life of the simple things.
The reason why I titled this video a slightly biased review, that portion of it, is simply because I think I can't be 100% unbiased after the event that happened with Steve there at the park. So Steve was a work camper there at Adventureland with us, and we spoke to him 4 or 5 different times. We weren't like real close, but we were getting to know him and we really liked him. And he got killed on one of the rides out there, and Adventureland chose to sweep it underneath the rug, and that really left a kind of a little bit of a sore spot for me. I have worked in oil and gas, and I've been on 2 job sites that have had fatalities, and both sites, they shut down the job site. They did a review of what happened that caused the fatality. If it was an equipment issue, they noted to everybody what it was and that what was going to be done about it. And if it was a thing about actual practices of the worker, there is a big safety meeting on how to do things safely and prevent that kind of incident in the future. This isn't like they just did a poor job handling this location, this amusement park, Adventureland, has had another fatality on that same ride, and they went to sweep this underneath the rug. They did this so much that I even witnessed a couple of times where people were talking about it. They were reprimanded for discussing it. And in addition to that, there was a lady that had posted on the Facebook page about it, his death, and that post had been removed from the Facebook page. It did go up later when it was questioned, but it had been removed, and it just seemed very callous to me and completely out of line about any kind of like professional place that I've ever worked at that
Or
has
even like they didn't do like a mass for his memory, that I think it would be something pretty,
Yeah, they didn't show any respect for him or his service,
his family,
or to anybody else in the park. They didn't note that he was important and that the employees there are important. So it just left a bad taste, and that's why this is definitely going to be slightly biased. I just, there's not a way for me. I think my mindset about them completely had changed. Now, I wanted to go ahead and note a couple of things that I did think were real positive about the place. I did think the RV park was nice. Well, not like real nice, but it was pretty good. I've been in a lot nicer RV parks, but it was pretty nice for a free site, and
full of rules.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. The other thing on it is you were paid for every hour you worked. You didn't have to trade any of the hours for the RV site, which is a positive to me, because there are a bunch of work camping jobs out there that you do trade those hours. I would say other positive things about the experience I've already shared in videos that have already gone up. I'll go ahead and make a playlist that I'll link here in an annotation and also in a card, so hopefully you'll be able to get that. I'll put a link to that same playlist here in the description so you guys can go and check that out. That way you can see the things that were good things about the experience that we've already shared. The first set of problematic situation and stuff that I kind of could overlooked. In fact, I've overlooked things before that were in that line. But the HR guy, when he interviewed us, he wasn't really honest. He kind of came across over time as kind of that used car salesman sort of feeling to him. And what went on is we were led to believe that we would have, on the first month that we were there, we would work 2 8-hour shifts on the weekends, you know, and we'd have about 16 hours. So we based our financial situation on that. That's not what the case ended up being. A lot of other people had a complaint about that as well. And some people were only working as little as 4 hours a week during that period that definitely needed more hours than that. And for us personally, we had noted that we didn't really want to work there when it was part-time, and we wanted to come in around the time that it opened up full-time, 7 days a week. And he really strongly urged us to come in that first month, and not really concern or showing much of any kind of concern for what was best for us at all, you know, as the employee, and what would make us happy as an employee. But I think he was just worried about making sure he had his numbers. That first month kind of set us back a little bit financially, which you can overlook. Maybe he just made a mistake. They filled more spots than they had planned, and so he thought there would be the hours, and the hours weren't there. And I'm sure that's probably a big part of it and why. But what really bothered me is he assured us with certainty that we would have 40 hours a week when the park opened up 7 days a week. That didn't end up being the truth at all. He even kind of promoted it, saying that we could even work 60 hours a week if we really wanted to. And when we got there, we never, the whole time we were in games, were ever scheduled more than 28 hours in a week. And the only way you could really pick up 40 hours in games was if you went ahead and hung around during the week, even on your days off, and tried to pick up shifts that other people had that weren't going to be able to make their shift. And that just really is a detraction from this lifestyle, where I'm not in this lifestyle to make $8.50 an hour and not experience anything, and not go anywhere, and not enjoy anything. The only reason why we were willing to work for $8.50 hours, we'd have a lot of fun, and I was hoping to go and see some things. Well, that didn't end up being the case. Let's go ahead and talk about actually working there. Working in games, having 16-year-old kids as your supervisors, sure, maybe there's occasionally a 16-year-old kid that has life experience or leadership skills to be ready to do that sort of thing, but most kids are not. And the problem with it there is almost all the supervisors, in more than half of the supervisors, were all kids, 16-year-old kids.
Yeah, but to have this position, they should have been trained, you know, to deal with the work campers people, because actually we are older than them, and they need an extra skill for it.
Yeah, chances are at that age they're not just going to be prepared for that. I don't think it's a good move in general for them to do that. And if they are going to do it, they have to make sure that the proper training is there on how they should go about handling folks. We found them to be very rude, demanding. There's a number of things there that tend to be rules that aren't like really written rules. And when you're working there and you start doing something that is against the non-written rule, you should be allowed to know. You should at least be spoken to politely and told this rule exists. Well, that's not the way they work in there. They're barking and yelling at folks, which I don't necessarily think is the best way to approach it at all, but certainly not the first situation that they come across, right? And they were overly authoritarian, and they didn't present things in a good manner, and it really bothered me that there was these unwritten rules. I had a couple of small run-ins with real situations where I felt really disrespected there, and I think you did as well, right? Yeah,
there was once that I was looking for James, and the supervisor just came in front of me and said, "Head out."
With those experiences that we had, and Catalina gave you an example of one that was really bothersome for her, we decided to move over to Rides. Rides was a much more mature environment. It was better, but there was still run-ins there. And one of the big problems I had was, it was in the first week that I'd been in rides, and I was working on a specific ride and got trained one way. It was the first day I'd been on it. Got trained one way to do it. That's the way they'd been doing it all week on that ride, from what I understand from the guy that I was working with. Relief comes in to relieve the operator that we had. The new operator that came to relieve starts yelling at us over the microphone, which irked me, bothered me, but he started to stop, said he would come down and talk to us. So he came down and talked to us, told us that we needed to let everybody all the way out of the exit gate before anybody entered in the enter gate at all. And okay, that's just not the way I was shown. As soon as my queue was all out, that's when I let people back in. And I started letting folks into my queue, and I started getting yelled at over the microphone again. Well, it turns out I didn't understand that not only did he want everybody to be allowed all the way out of the gate before we let anybody in, he also wanted to make sure that we both were back to each of our gates, okay, on next to each other, because there was 2 sides and 2 assistants. So he wanted us all to be back at the gate before we let anybody else in. So whether everybody was out and one of us got back to the gate first, we were expected to stop. But we weren't told this at the time that he came down and talked to us. He yelled at me over the microphone again in front of all the guests in the park. Some people started laughing or whatever. It upset me when he yelled at me about it, so I asked the people to start going back into the gate. Then he yelled at me saying, "Don't chase him out now," and just I really didn't like this situation, and I didn't like that it was done over the microphone. So I went to the front desk. I told them if this was normal protocol, then I was going to go ahead, and thought it was best that I didn't work there. And they told me, "Oh no, it's not protocol, you shouldn't have been yelling over the microphone, da 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 da." So I went and ended up going back to work. Well, a little while later, less than a week later, there was an instance where a guy got really mad at one of the other assistants because the assistant didn't let his kid on the ride because his kid was too short. The guy was making a big scene, and when managers didn't let the kid go on the ride because he was too short, then he started making things up that supposedly went on, even though his kid never been on the ride or anything. And the supervisor came and started behaving because the guy was still in the park to make it look like we were being reprimanded, is what I got told at the end of it. But here they're getting on our case about it like it actually happened, okay? And not until the big ordeal and scene is made am I then allowed to explain that it didn't happen. And they go, "Oh, well, that's oftentimes the case. A lot of times when people are trying to get their money back, they do lie and da 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 da." But here I had to sit through in front of the public being reprimanded so this guy could see it. And to me, that's not okay. It's not okay to be treated that way, and that was a final straw for me. I was just like, the disrespect of their workers was just beyond anything that I wanted to deal with. It prevented it from being a fun experience there, and I was unwilling to work there anymore. And so we had already put in our 2 weeks, but at that point I went to him. I was just like, I'm not working anymore at all. I'm not giving them another hour of my labor.
Well, my take in the rides is like we are dealing with people's lives, and then it's so easy for us to get hurt that I think they should add something else in our paycheck or per hour, right?
Yeah, and I understand that. One thing I would also say to that is there's some rides that really aren't safe, in my opinion, for the workers, and especially for the workers, because the workers are there trying to keep the individuals that are there safe. I don't really want to go into it too much. I just There were several things that just really bothered me. To wrap this up, I didn't really like how they treated people. It was an authoritarian environment, period. There was a gentleman that had come to visit us, well, a couple that had come to visit us, and they went into the park to go hang out as paying customers, and they were told that they could bring in their gimbal, even though selfie sticks weren't allowed in the park. So they were allowed to bring this into the park after telling them what it was, and they decided to let them do it. Well, they get in the park, and almost right away after they're in the park, the gentleman presented it as pretty much were attacked, verbally, about no selfie sticks, not coming to him and politely saying, hey, look, you're not allowed to have selfie sticks in here, I can't let you utilize that, and then let the gentleman tell him that they were actually approved to utilize it. Immediately it was an aggressive stance, and that comes from top down. That's kind of how I felt like management was about everything, and it kind of bled over into individuals and made the park less fun environment.
Yeah, and it is what I took as well from them. It's not the treatment just for the employees, it's for the customer as well, right?
Yeah.
That authoritarian, like we are in a military base.
Yeah, it just comes off real aggressive, and it's not a feel that I liked,
Yeah, it just, if you're enjoying just those aggressive attitudes, just makes you feel like, that's not that fun anymore.
Yeah, and who wants to work for $8.50 an hour if it's not fun, right?
Right.
So that's kind of boils down really why we didn't want to be there any longer. I didn't want to come on here and just be blasting the folks over there. I hope that some of this information that we presented in this video comes across to them, and maybe they're able to make changes in the future. Now, as far as would I refer anybody to doing that work camping job, most cases no, especially not working age folk. It's a bad deal. Okay, you're not going to have the hours. It's not a great environment to work in, and it's just not financially makes sense in our opinion. Now, for an older couple that say has Social Security, a pension, maybe you don't mind the authoritarian type attitude, you would like the lower hours, it could be a good thing. The work is definitely way easier than what I've heard about camp hosting. Okay. In fact, there was an older couple that were right next to us that said the reason why they do Adventureland is it's easier than camp hosting work is, and they don't have to work so many hours to get their camp spot. They get it right away and paid for all their hours, so it's just a better deal than camp hosting for them.
Yeah, well, I think I would suggest anybody to work there, because
You wouldn't suggest anybody to work there?
no, because like for me it was like I learned a lot. Like as James said, like there were like good and bad things. The good, the campground was nice. We made really good friends that referred us to our new job. And well, the bad points that turned it to be good, that I learned how in a supervisor position, how I cannot treat people.
Yeah.
It is what I learned there. And well, guys, we can take like good things from bad ones as well, and that's the reason I would say, like, I would recommend, because you always can learn something.
And that's where I'm gonna kind of end this too as well. We are still glad that we went and did it, just simply because we met some cool people and we got a great referral, and so that referral probably wouldn't have come if we hadn't been there at Adventureland, and so that's great. But as far as the park is concerned and who our employer was, I really didn't feel like they provided enough value for us to ever work there again, and I wouldn't actively suggest it to anybody. Get out there, connect with people, live your big story.
Make sure you do something every single day to reduce road suck.
Peace, guys.
Peace not.
Without you, my friend, and I tell you all about it when I see you again. We come a long way from where we began.